Mr. President.
Republican leader.
Mr. President, there was a time when Democrats opposed government shutdowns. And not just opposed. Democrats were critical of holding government funding hostage to political demands. Our Democrat colleague from Michigan said that funding the government is, quote, Congress's most basic responsibility, end quote. The senior senator from Massachusetts, a leading Democrat, said, and I quote, the least we can do, the bare minimum that we can do, would be to pass a continuing resolution to keep the doors open and the lights on, end quote. And the Democrat leader, just last year, described, and I quote, the chaos and pain and needless heartache, end quote, that a shutdown brings to American families. So what's changed? Why are Democrats in 2025 suddenly comfortable shutting down the government and subjecting Americans to all that chaos, pain, and heartache that the Democrat leader described? Why did Democrats instigate the longest full government shutdown in history? Well, they'd like you to believe that it's about health care. It's not. Republicans have been perfectly clear that we're willing to have a discussion about health care, just not while government funding is being held hostage and all the federal employees that come with that. So if this were really about health care, Democrats would be voting in favor of the clean CR as the quickest way to reopen the government and start the discussions. But that's not where we are. And that's because what's really driving Democrats isn't health care. It's not a desire for negotiations. It's politics and far-left activists who demanded a showdown with President Trump. The real reason we're now in the longest full government shutdown in history is because Democrats are afraid of backlash from the far left if they stand down. One Democrat senator was quoted this week saying, and I quote, "People are going to get hammered if they vote for the House-passed bill to reopen the government and keep it funded through November the 21st, end quote. People are going to get hammered if they vote for the clean, continuing resolution. That's from a Democrat senator, Mr. President. Hammered by outside groups, hammered by left-wing political activists. Or take it from one of the organizers of Saturday's No Kings rally who said, and I quote, "I'm telling every elected I talk to, that is every elected official that I talk to, millions will be out cheering you on, or they will be calling for new leadership," end quote. Democrats, Mr. President, are keeping the government shut down because they're scared. Scared of a primary from the left. Scared of losing fundraising dollars. Scared that the far left will punish them if they don't appear to be fighting President Trump hard enough. Unfortunately, Mr. President, Democrats' political games are having real consequences. Airport tower staffing shortages have caused thousands of flight delays nationwide. Medicare patients and people in rural areas are dealing with the elimination of telehealth services. Military families have turned to food banks in unprecedented numbers. And things are about to get worse. The nutrition assistance programs that millions of Americans depend on to feed their families are in jeopardy. And tomorrow, federal workers will miss a full paycheck because of the Democrat shutdown. That's right. Tomorrow, federal workers will miss a full paycheck thanks to Senate Democrats. Mr. President, Republicans want to do something about this. We'd love to pass the clean, continuing, nonpartisan resolution, which would pay everyone. Passed the House a long time ago. We voted on it 12 times here now. They continue to, with the exception, 3 exceptions, to block vote against it. 12 times now, Democrats have blocked just paying our federal employees. And Mr. President, it's federal employees all throughout the federal workforce, which literally is millions of Americans. But it's people right here. People in this chamber, people in this building had to stay here night before last, all night, to listen to some Democrats drone on. One Democrat senator read the same poem 4 times. They were here all night not getting paid. 335, exactly, federal employees in this building had to stay here all night, work through the night and into the next day, so they could make some campaign political speech or point in the middle of the night that nobody's listening to, obviously, which is why I guess you read the same poem 4 times, four different times, reading from books, while the people sitting here doing the work aren't getting paid. And so today, Mr. President, we're going to have a vote on Senator Ron Johnson's bill that will guarantee pay for federal employees who are working through the shutdown. The 335 people who had to be here night before last to listen to that. They would finally get paid. It's also people like air traffic controllers, TSA agents, park rangers, federal law enforcement, ICE, Border Patrol, people putting their lives at risk to keep Americans safe. So we'll see what Democrats do. Do they think that people that are working ought to get paid? Well, to date, Democrats have rejected every opportunity they've been given to put the American people ahead of their far-left base. As I said, they've rejected a clean CR now 12 times. A CR, a continuing resolution that would fund the government until November the 21st to give us time to finish the appropriations process. A clean CR, a nonpartisan CR, a CR that has no partisan riders, no policy gimmicks that came over from the House, just clean, just fund the government, straight up, sitting right here at the desk of the United States Senate. 5 Democrats could help us pass it today. We could send it to the President, he would sign it into law, the government opens up, and all the people here and across our federal government would get paid. Last week, the Democrats blocked the bipartisan defense appropriations bill that would have paid our troops. Came out of the Senate Appropriations Committee by a vote of 26-3. Very bipartisan on the floor. Should have been. Usually is. Usually gets 80-plus votes on the floor of the Senate. But they blocked it. Would have paid our troops, defense appropriations bill. So today, we're going to have another opportunity to show whether they stand on the side of hardworking Americans or remain beholden to their far-left base. Now, Mr. President, we've heard Democrats this week criticize Senator Johnson's bill because it would provide pay only to workers who continue to work through the shutdown. They say they want everybody to get paid. I've got great news for them. The clean, continuing resolution sitting at the desk would pay everybody. Everybody. We just need 5 more Democrats to support it. 5 more gets us to 60. Takes a supermajority in the Senate. Democrats are the only thing standing in the way of the outcome that they say they want, which is for everybody to get paid. So, Mr. President, the clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution sits right there at the desk. The President Trump, is ready to sign it. The shutdown could be over in a matter of hours if just 5 Democrats would agree. But, unfortunately, the shadow of Democrats' far-left base continues to stand in the way. And you don't have to take it from me. As one source familiar with Democrats' thinking told The Hill this week, and I quote, "We would have enough votes to reopen the government if people were not terrified of getting the guillotine," end quote. We would have enough votes to reopen the government if Democrats were not terrified of getting the guillotine. Mr. President, we just need 5 more Democrats to show some courage. This was a statement made yesterday by a Democrat House member. And sometimes people around here say the quiet part out loud. Sometimes it's just kind of subconsciously. And this is what she said. She's a member of the Democrat leadership in the House of Representatives. Of course, there will be families that are going to suffer, but is one of the few leverage times we have, end quote. Boy, just take that in. Take that in. Of course, there will be families that are going to suffer. But we don't want to give up our leverage. Leverage for what? Leverage for what? Mr. President, we need 5 Democrats to show a little courage. Reopen the government, and let's get to work. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Democrat leader.
Mr. President, we're staring into the abyss of the healthcare crisis here in America. And what is Donald Trump doing as we stare into the abyss of the healthcare crisis? He's flying off yet again to another corner of the world while people's premiums are set to skyrocket here at home. He shut down the government, Trump has, for 23 days, the second longest shutdown ever, by refusing to negotiate with Democrats. He's bulldozing the East Wing of the White House to make way for his own ballroom. His own Justice Department is getting ready to cut himself a personal check to Donald Trump for $230 million out of taxpayer money when health people are suffering in terms of their health care premiums. And then he caught trying to push a nominee with proud Nazi and racist views. And again, we're in the middle of a health care crisis that will decimate tens of millions of Americans. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to want to touch the topic with a 10-foot pole, and has decided to fly off to another country yet again without negotiating with Democrats. Leader Jeffries and I asked him to sit down and talk with us. We said, we need to talk. He refused. Donald Trump would literally rather fly to another country than meet with Democrats to negotiate on health care, because he knows the American people are on one side of the issue and his base, his right-wing MAGA base, is on the other. He's afraid to touch the issue. So he does his version of Johnson's shutting down the House. He flies away. It's hard to fathom someone more out of touch and oblivious to our nation's struggles than the current president. Let's take the ballroom, for instance. This is the image Donald Trump doesn't want America to see. This is the picture Donald Trump told his people to hide from the American people. And do you know what the picture represents? It's not just the desecration of the White House. It shows that Donald Trump is not focused on fixing health care, but rather on vanity projects like this one that don't do anything to benefit the American people. They only benefit Trump and his ego. Donald Trump is telling the American people, no Medicaid for you. The ballroom for me. Americans are appalled at these images. A YouGov poll this week found that 50% of Americans oppose this ballroom project, only 33% in support. To Americans, the image of Donald Trump adding a wrecking ball to the White House is a symbol for what he is doing to the whole country. Yes, this image Americans are seeing, and they don't like it. They don't like it. I asked my Republican colleagues, where are you? But frankly, the East Wing teardown is not the only thing Donald Trump is focused on instead of fixing health care. He is also using the presidency to enrich himself. This week we learned that Trump is pushing his own DOJ to write him a $230 million check because his feelings got hurt after being investigated for criminal wrongdoing. While Americans are agonizing over health care, Donald Trump is using the presidency to reach into the taxpayer's till and put money in his own pocket. Imagine the gall of this president who tells the American people, no health care for you, but you pay me an additional $230 million. Again, I ask my Republican colleagues, where are you? And again, I don't expect Republicans to oppose Donald Trump very often, but they should be outraged by the way he's pillaging the DOJ to enrich himself. And finally, Americans are all getting awfully fed up with the Trump administration's incompetence, corruption, and chaos. And the data shows it. A few days ago, a Gallup poll showed movement you rarely see among the electorate in a short amount of time. Democrats' party ID is now 7 points higher since the start of the year. 7 points higher. It was even with Republicans. Are you a Democrat or Republican? When Trump took office, it's now +7 Democrat. You rarely see that kind of movement for that kind of number so quickly. It should be an immediate red light warning to my Republican colleagues. To quote the pollster Harry Enton, who works for CNN, I was shocked to see how Democrats have gained on party ID per Gallup. Democrats lead by 7 points versus a tie at the start of the year. Looks a lot more like the 2018 cycle than 2022. Indeed, Democrats have gained House seats in all midterms since 1990, when party ID looks like what Gallup has. That's Harry Enton, not me. But you don't need a political genius to understand why these numbers are moving. People see what Donald Trump is making. People see that Donald Trump is making their lives worse on costs, on health care, and on their financial security. We spend so much time here in Washington focused on the day-to-day back and forth. But people back home don't care about the back and forth here in Washington. They care about how much they're paying for groceries. They care about their rising electricity bills. They care about the dramatic increase so many will pay in their health care premiums very soon. What has Donald Trump done while all this is happening, while people are just sitting down at the dinner table on Friday nights and wondering how the heck am I going to pay the bills? He's enacted the biggest health care cuts in American history. He's closing rural hospitals. Americans can see with their own eyes what Trump is doing, and so I say to my Republican colleagues, beware. This Gallup poll is a warning that Americans are fed up with the high costs that go up each week and the Trump administration's incompetence, corruption, and chaos. And it's only going to get worse the more Donald Trump doubles down on this shutdown and on his failed policies. Now, the Johnson bill. That is Ron Johnson, Senator Johnson. Right now, on day 23 of the longest total government shutdown in American history, millions of American families are wondering how they'll make rent, pay their bills, or put food on the table. And what's the Republican response? To hand Donald Trump and his right-hand man, Russ Vought, the originator of the evil, awful Project 2025, to hand Russell Vought even more power to decide who gets paid and who gets punished. Let me make one point very clear. The shutdown is on Donald Trump's back, and the American people know it. They know that Republicans have the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and the shutdown is on them. So, Senator Ron Johnson and Republicans are feeling the heat, have come up with this proposal. Johnson and Republicans know, because they're feeling the heat, that the American people know exactly who's in charge: Donald Trump and Republicans. When workers are laid off, when they're furloughed, when they miss a paycheck, America knows who's to blame. It's on Donald Trump's back, and that's why Donald Trump and his allies are pushing this bill. The bill would not reopen the government, which is the only permanent solution to this crisis. And Democrats want to reopen the government as quickly as we can. We want to sit down with Thune, with Johnson, with Trump, and negotiate a way to address this horrible health care crisis. We also want to make sure every last federal worker who has suffered during the Trump shutdown is taken care of. So that's why Democrats are offering two solutions that actually include all of our federal employees, not just the ones the president picks and chooses. Oh, I'll lay you off, I'll furlough you, I won't do you, I like you, I don't like you. That's not the way you govern, but that's how Trump seems to govern. Our bill is an antidote to that awful way that Trump uses when he picks and chooses winners and losers that he likes and hates. The Republican bill is a ruse. It's nothing more than another tool for Trump to hurt federal workers and American families and to keep this shutdown going for as long as he wants. We will not give Donald Trump a license to play politics with people's livelihoods. That's why we oppose this bill, the Johnson bill, because it doesn't end the pain of the shutdown, it extends it. The only way to pay every federal worker is for Republicans to get serious, sit down with Democrats, avert their health care crisis, and reopen the government. I yield the floor.
Republican Whip.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to cloture on the motion to proceed to calendar 191 S3012 and the Tableson nomination.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today is day 23 of the Schumer shutdown of the government, and we just heard the minority leader right here on the floor continue to practice the politics of pain. and it's pain felt by the American people. Remember, Senator Schumer is the one that said to the press, every day gets better for us. I don't know who us is. It's not the American people, not the people who come to work all across the country, the Wyoming National Guard, people all around America, people in your state as mine, Mr. President, people who aren't going to get paid. Senator Schumer said, can't we do anything about it? Yeah, they could vote to open the government. Yesterday, they decided once again to vote to keep the government shut. And tomorrow, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are going to miss their paychecks because Chuck Schumer and the Democrats will not vote to open the government. Won't do it, haven't done it. 23 days. Democrats have now set the record for the longest full-time government shutdown in American history. In previous shutdowns, some of the agencies stayed open. Not now. Longest history of the United States government shutdown of the entire government. Because this time no one's getting paid. Not the police officers who had to come in during the so-called filibuster by the senator from Oregon, Senator Merkley. None of the people at the desk, none of the people who were working around the Capitol, none of even the Democrat staff or the Republican staff who were here as Senator Merkley droned on and on and on through the night, reading the same poem 4 times. To no avail. It was rubbish, all of it. Democrats have shut down this government, and they are punishing the American people as a result, and they're more concerned about playing politics than they are about protecting working families. It's a big game that they're playing as American families suffer, and they don't seem to care that families are suffering. They're actually bragging about the fact that families are suffering. This is the whip, the Democrat whip in the House of Representatives. What did she say this week? It wasn't just some slip of the tongue. She was in an interview. There's a video of her on television. I saw it earlier this morning, of saying, of course there's going to be families who are going to suffer. Of course, she says, there's going to be suffer, almost gleefully, because it's one of the few leverage times we have. That is the Democrat whip of the House of Representatives. You may have served with her, Mr. President, when you served in the House before coming to the Senate. You know this individual. This is the politics of pain practiced by the Democrats, and apparently they don't believe that withholding paychecks or stamps or funding to feed women and infants and children is a problem. They think it's leverage. They think it's a big game. Leverage for what? To give taxpayer-funded health care to illegal immigrants? That's one of the demands that we got from Chuck Schumer in the letter, the demand to open the government. Lay it all out there. What do they want? Lots of things, including health care free, paid for by taxpayers for illegal immigrants. They wanted $1.5 trillion in permanent new spending added to the debt. Because who are they trying to impress? The radical wing of the Democrat Party. Their radical left wing. That's what the Democrats are trying to do. That's what Chuck Schumer is trying to do. He doesn't care. He's standing here talking. He's only talking to one group. It's the radical wing of the party, the people in New York who've nominated Mondami to be the mayor of that city. The Democrats are willing to cause the American people to suffer because they want to continue to pass liberal policies that Americans don't want, never voted for, but they're being demanded by that radical wing of the Democrat Party. Well, so what have we done as Republicans? We have proposed a clean, bipartisan, continuing resolution to reopen the government and that pays the workers who have been working for weeks without pay so they don't miss their paychecks. Democrats have rejected it, continue to reject it, not once, not twice, 12 times. It's a cycle of obstruction, Mr. President. Democrats voted for clean continuing resolutions, as I've seen you say, Mr. President, a number of times, heard you say it on television. The Democrats voted for it 13 different times when Joe Biden was president. Now they oppose it. Why? Because President Trump is in the White House, and they don't even like the White House. They just had a picture of some of the improvements that the president is doing at the White House. They don't like that either. They don't like the fact he's in the White House. They don't like the fact he's improving the White House. They don't like the fact he's going to continue to be in the White House. And speaking of the president, just days ago, he told the Democrats he's happy to meet, and I agree, we were there when he said it, he says happy to meet once they reopen the government. But since the Democrats continue to refuse to reopen the government, the Senate's going to try to do the next best thing. So today, this body is going to move to begin debate on Senator Johnson's Shutdown Fairness Act. So let's talk about it. There is not a single good argument that I have heard against passing it immediately, because this bill ensures that the men and women who keep our nation safe, that they receive their pay during this Schumer Democrat-caused shutdown as they play politics. We got to pay the people who are keeping our nations safe. It pays our troops. They're protecting our nation at home and abroad. It pays the Coast Guard as they continue to patrol our waters. It pays Border Patrol as they defend our southern border. It pays members of Immigration Customs Enforcement as they round up and deport illegal immigrant criminals. It pays the air traffic controllers who guide flights safely to their destination. It pays the TSA agents who screen the passengers at every airport in America. It pays the Capitol Police officers that have worked for weeks here without pay. It applies back to the very first day of the Schumer shutdown, and that means employees will get their full pay. It applies to this shutdown, and it applies to future shutdowns, and I think that's very important, Mr. President. We cannot allow the Democrats to continue to painfully treat the people and use the American people as what the whip calls in the Democrats' House leverage, hurting American people for leverage. No. So not just this shutdown, future shutdowns to provide stability and predictability to those who keep us safe. So would I prefer a clean continuing resolution that fully reopens government today, immediately? Absolutely. But Democrats have blocked a clean bipartisan continuing resolution every single time we have offered them. And it's been reported that Democrats are going to filibuster this bill today, too. So when Democrats stand up here today and criticize the bill, remember this: the Democrats have a choice. Pay the essential workers who are working right now when they're working here without a paycheck, or send them into the weekend with empty bank accounts and bills they cannot pay. If Democrats vote no, it won't be about fairness. It's all going to be about politics, a dangerous game of politics they're playing. Remember what the House Democrat whip told the press. She said, of course families are going to suffer. This is a Democrat. Of course, she says, families are going to suffer. And this is one of the few times, the few leverage times we have. It's not about helping the American people. It's about taking advantage and using the American people maliciously, terribly, disgustingly, disgracefully. Democrats vote no. It's all going to be about leverage for the pain the American people have. Mr. President, it's time to reopen the government. It truly is. Mr. President, on a separate matter, on Saturday, the annual Border War football game comes to Laramie, Wyoming. For the 117th time, the Wyoming Cowboys will play Colorado State University. The winner of the game gets something called the Bronze Boot. This year, the Pokes are going to play in special cowboy and coal jerseys. And uniformed coal miners from all around Wyoming will lead the Cowboys onto the field. This is a fantastic way to celebrate Wyoming's proud history and heritage. And in Wyoming, we have world-class coal. Wyoming's Powder River Basin provides nearly half of all the coal produced in America. It is clean coal. It is low-sulfur coal. We have enough coal to power America for at least the next 100 years. Here in the Senate, Republicans are also celebrating this vital industry. Senate Republicans introduced a resolution earlier this week to designate this week as National Coal Week. And I want to thank and congratulate Senator Cynthia Lummis for leading this important effort. No one knows better than our home state of Wyoming how important coal is to keep the lights on. Coal is the most affordable, available, reliable source of energy on the planet. And national security, of course, starts with energy security. Coal means freedom. That's why coal is such an important part of Republicans' agenda to unleash American energy. We're cutting red tape. We're opening up 13 million acres of federal land for mining. Coal production is up more than 6% since last year. The coal renaissance that we are seeing today is part of the broader American energy revival. It was even reported this week that the price of gasoline has fallen to below $3 for the first time in 4 years. You didn't see this when Joe Biden was in the White House and they were fighting American energy and making us desperate for energy. Oh no, we're now heading into an energy-dominant time for America. Across the country, families are feeling the financial relief that comes from returning to common sense energy policies. Republicans know you can protect the environment without punishing the economy. Democrats never understood that. And in Wyoming, we know better than anyone else. America is an energy superpower. Wyoming is America's energy breadbasket. We have the resources, we have the workers, and now we are acting like it. So as we mark National Coal Week, Mr. President, I want to thank the great men and women of our coal industry in Wyoming and across the nation for helping make America energy dominant once again. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
Minority Whip.
Mr. President, I'm sure that those who are following the opening remarks in the Senate today can sense the frustration bordering on anger with the current situation, the current status quo. It is shared on both sides of the aisle. I've had the good fortune of serving in the House of Representatives and the Senate, representing parts of Illinois and then the entire state for a big part of my life. I've watched these institutions, the House and the Senate, face frustrating, disappointing, challenging situations. I found that the rule of thumb is basically if reasonable people will sit down at a table and put the items on the table and say, let's see if we can find common ground, it usually works. It could work here too. We could reopen this government by the end of the day. I believe it. It's going to be more difficult because the House of Representatives is not in session. I believe it's now been 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, that they've been out of session. They need to be here, doing their job, helping to work to find a solution to this frustrating situation. What exactly is behind the shutdown of this federal government? Let me tell you, it's a serious issue that affects virtually every American. Do you have health insurance? I do. Most of us do. Is it expensive? Yes. Do you still need it? God, yes. Without it, it would be even worse. One automobile accident, one broken bone, one serious diagnosis, you could wipe out the savings of most American families. That's the reality. So health insurance is critical. People need it. And you know what's going to happen soon? I'm sorry to say, we're going to see a dramatic increase in health insurance premiums. There was a debate here several months ago on what the president called his big, beautiful budget. And the big, beautiful budget did many things, but in addition to some of the spending decisions, it made the decision that we were going to give a tax break to the wealthiest people in America. People like Elon Musk. His tax break, if I remember correctly, I don't have it written down here, was $230,000 a year. I would say that's a lot of money for most Americans. Mr. Musk, though, is so rich, multi-billionaire, he probably wouldn't even notice it. But the $230,000 tax break for the wealthiest Americans meant that other programs needed to be cut. And what were the programs that President Trump and the Republicans in Congress decided to cut? One was Medicaid. Medicaid is a pretty universal program that affects millions of Americans in the services that they receive from clinics, from hospitals, even living in nursing homes. Medicaid's an important part. The Republicans, in order to provide the money for tax cuts for people like Elon Musk, needed to cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid over the next 10 years. What does it mean in my state? Well, we worry. Will rural hospitals or any inner city hospitals survive if Medicaid is cut? Will the nursing home people be able to stay in the nursing homes? Those are important and critical questions. The second part of the decision by the Republicans in the big, beautiful budget to provide a tax break for the wealthy was basically to eliminate the tax subsidy that is available for middle-income families under the Affordable Care Act. What does that mean? Well, for some people, they're going to see the results in the mail in just a matter of days. The target date in Illinois, which I represent, is October 27th. Watch for the mail then, because on October 27th, you'll receive a notice about what's going to happen to your health insurance premiums January 1st. they're going to go up an average of 114%. So take a look at what you're now paying for health insurance and anticipate that it's going to go up. How much, I'm not sure, but it could easily double. For a lot of families that are struggling to survive, that's going to become a difficult challenge. How are we going to pay this premium? These are the same families that come back from the grocery store every Saturday and Sunday and say, I can't believe what's happened to the price of beef. I can't believe what's happened to the price of produce. I mean, across the board, people see the cost of living going up, and now, in an essential service, health insurance premiums, we're going to see this dramatic increase. It's this increase that's going to affect millions of Americans, over 20 million Americans, that is the heart of this decision about whether this government is going to reopen. We have said to the Republicans, we believe that American families need a helping hand and need it now, not something to talk about later, but now, so that we can do something to stop these premiums from going up dramatically. You know what's going to happen. When the premiums go up, some families will say, no problem, making plenty of money, hate it, but we can pay it. Other families are going to say, how in the world are we going to do this? We're going to have to get a health insurance policy which has more co-pays and deductibles that are paid for us for virtually everything. So we're going to pay through the course of the next year for this increase in premiums anyway. And some will walk away, say, I just can't afford it. Can't make ends meet, can't pay utility bills, electric bills that are going up, and other things that we face, and this health insurance premium too. We're just going to have to drop the insurance and hope for the best. Well, I'm sorry for those people, because it not only means that they're facing risks in life without the protection of health insurance. We know statistically that when you don't have health insurance or any basic health insurance, that you forego treatment and examinations. And that's not good, and it's not healthy, and it doesn't lead to a good result. So is that an important issue for your family? I'll bet it is. It's an important issue for every single family. And that's what is at the heart of this government shutdown. The need for the Republicans and Democrats to sit at a table and say, how can we spare American families from this hospitalization increase that they're going to face inevitably, millions are going to face, with bad consequences. Can we do it? Of course we can. People of goodwill can reach a conclusion that they're going to find a way to compromise and see this issue come to an end. We need to do it now. Not next week, not the week following, but now. There's too much hardship that's going on with this government shutdown, and it should not continue. So my appeal is to the President, delay your trip overseas. My appeal to the Republicans in the House is come back home, come back down, I shouldn't say home, come back to Washington, leave your home, come back to Washington and go to work with us on a bipartisan basis. Is that what America wants? You bet it is. To address this issue of health insurance premiums, do it on a bipartisan basis and end this government shutdown. We can do it today. There's a lot of furniture in this Capitol. I've seen it over the years, and there are a lot of tables. There are many tables big enough for the leaders in Congress and the President to sit down and reach an agreement. That sit down ought to happen sooner rather than later. Mr. President, on another issue unrelated. Last Friday, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to greenlight the deployment of National Guard troops in my home state of Illinois after the lower courts had temporarily blocked the deployment. In her decision, District Court Judge April Perry said the Trump administration has produced, and I quote, no credible evidence that there is a danger of rebellion in Illinois. Rather, Judge Perry found that, quote, the unnecessary deployment of military troops untrained for local policing will escalate tension and undermine the ordinary law enforcement activities of state and local entities. 3 judges on the 7th Circuit Appeals Court, including one appointed by President Bush and another appointed by President Trump, considered that decision by the lower court and agreed with Judge Perry. They found, and I quote, the facts do not justify the president's actions in Illinois. Political opposition is not rebellion. That panel is right. Last Saturday, I was part of the No Kings demonstration. We estimate there were 100,000 people in Grant Park, the Petrollo Band Show. It was nonviolent. It was orderly. Oh, they were loud once in a while, but no one was involved in any sort of rebellion. They were exercising their constitutional rights to express their opinion about the policies of this government. I've been honored to represent the great state of Illinois for over 40 years in the Senate and the House. And yes, like every state, Illinois has its challenges, such as addressing crime. But for the last 2 decades, the murder rate in Illinois has been lower than the murder rates in Republican-led states like Missouri, Louisiana, and Alabama. And violent crime is down dramatically in the city of Chicago. We should work together to build on this success and reduce the crime rate even more. But the president's actions in sending in National Guard troops, even from the state of Texas to Illinois, is not about public safety, it's about politics. And his unjustified and unlawful attempts to deploy troops to Chicago and other American cities are a threat to our basic democratic institutions. The Supreme Court should reject the president's petition to use these troops in America. There is no emergency that justifies bypassing the regular appeals process and resolving this issue on the court's shadow docket without the full public scrutiny this issue deserves. Just last week, I received a heartbreaking message from one of my constituents, Petty Officer Second Class Jessica Windland, a hardworking provider at Lake County Health Department in Waukegan, Illinois. In her letter, Officer Windland mentioned that some of her patients have stopped showing up for their appointments because ICE officers are camping out in front of the facility. Picture it, if you will. People, families taking their children in for a doctor's appointment, afraid to go leave their car and walk the short distance to the clinic because ICE officials in their combat uniforms and masked in unmarked vehicles were lurking outside the clinic. She said in what she wrote to me, "My patients have not been able to come to their medical appointments out of fear of being taken." These raids are impacting the ability of medical providers to provide basic family treatment. Jessica also mentioned she was treating a mother at the health center when the mother, quote, received several phone calls and messages that ICE agents had raided the apartment buildings right behind the facility. The patient was so distraught and in tears that treatment could not be completed that day because she needed to rush home to her other children. Imagine for a moment the fear that a mother must have felt receiving a call from her kids, scared and screaming that masked men are trying to break into their home. Is this America? Can you imagine the confusion and fear those children must have felt seeing those men at their door, wondering who they were and if they were there to hurt them or help them? And it's not just at health centers in Illinois. ICE is camping out in front of city halls, schools, churches, regularly outside of Home Depot, where they detained a father who is the sole provider for his 2 children, including a daughter with stage 4 cancer. Do you remember what led us into this situation? You heard it over and over at President Trump's rallies. Rapists, terrorists, murderers, criminally insane, sexual predators were coming across our border. Well, let me tell you, I'll sign up with the president. We don't want those people coming into this country, and if they commit a crime while they're here, they should be gone, period. Now let's talk about the others, the 11 million who've been in America, working jobs, raising families, going to church, paying their taxes. They're the ones that they've targeted. 70% of the people who've been stopped by ICE in the state of Illinois, 70% of them have no criminal record whatsoever. They're not rapists and murderers and terrorists. They're people who overstayed a visa. And they may be American citizens. The ICE officers obviously don't distinguish any difference there. When will my colleagues on the other side of the aisle decide the cruelty and fear tactics of this administration must stop? This is America. When will they choose to put an end to the racial profiling which is going on and detention of even American citizens, including veterans and children? And this is all supposed to be about violent crime. It's not. Enough. If this was actually about reducing crime, President Trump would not be slashing programs that actually help local law enforcement. This cruelty is all for show. While Americans continue to pay inflated prices at the grocery store and face the prospect of skyrocketing health care premiums, this is what the president is focused on. Tearing families apart and separating kids from their parents. Our country is better than this. It is better than this cruelty and lawlessness. Now is the time for us to stand up for the rule of law and our Constitution. President Trump's claims of invasions, rebellions, emergency to justify calling the military into American cities are shameless attempts to bypass our constitutional checks and balances. It was the Republican governor of Oklahoma who said last week, if Governor Pritzker of Illinois tried to send his National Guard troops into Oklahoma, the people of Oklahoma and that governor, the Republican governor, would resist it. But that's exactly what's happening in my home state of Illinois. This president, without invitation, is sending National Guard troops in from Texas. The Supreme Court should stand up to this administration's attempt to cut both Congress and the courts out of decisions squarely given to them by the Constitution. Political opposition, peaceful protest, nonviolent civil disobedience are not rebellion. They are the bedrock of our democracy. Local law enforcement officials have proven they're capable in Illinois and most places of handling any unlawful or unruly behavior. As Illinois State Attorney General Kwame Raoul explained to the court, no protest activity in Illinois has rendered the president unable to execute federal law. If the Supreme Court enables Trump, President Trump, to deploy troops to American cities over the objection of state officials, before the courts rule on the legality of these actions, I fear it's going to cause lasting harm to America. I ask my Republican colleagues, are you really prepared in your home state for the next president, after President Trump, to send in troops to your state without permission, without consent of your government? Are you ready for masked soldiers to grab your constituents from their homes? My constituents elected me to represent them in this fight. I implore you to do the right by your constituents and push back against the president's illegal power grab before your state is the next victim. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oklahoma.
I'd love to introduce this Senate to a couple that I know. Husband, wife, both work for the federal government. Young couple, expecting their first child. This week they will miss a paycheck, both of them. You tell me how many people in their early days of marriage, both spouses could miss a paycheck while they're preparing for their first child. But that's the reality that's being faced by that couple, and I'm sure a lot of other folks that stepped up to serve their nation, serving in a federal agency, but because of a government shutdown, they're not going to get paid. I'd love to introduce this body to a single mom that just a couple of weeks ago got the invitation to go to the FAA Academy and to become an air traffic controller. Very difficult to get into that school, but is in the process, has been accepted, is in the process, has quit her job, has canceled her lease, and as a single mom is taking the risk to be able to step out in a new great career. But right in the process of stepping out to do that new great career, there's a government shutdown, and now she has no idea what's about to happen. She's quit her job already. She's canceled her lease already. She was preparing to move to get to the academy. Now what does she do? For all the folks out there that say this government shutdown is no big deal, or as my Democratic colleagues in the House have said, some families are going to have to suffer to give us leverage, here are the families that are actually suffering to give my Democratic colleagues leverage so they can discuss health care. But let me not just talk about health care they want to discuss. Their focus seems to be on a COVID-era subsidy that they created for the Affordable Care Act to try to make it more affordable, because here's the problem in my state. In my state in Oklahoma, the Affordable Care Act, the cost for it has increased 200% in 6 years. while commercial insurance has increased 29% in those same 6 years. So the quote-unquote Affordable Care Act is only affordable if there's just one subsidy on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, because the structure of the Affordable Care Act is not affordable. It's only affordable if there's more and more and more and more tax dollars sent to insurance companies to try to cover more and more and more on it. And my Democratic colleagues say we're going to keep the government closed until we even get more money on that, and we don't want to discuss anything. Well, here's the problem. We've got 200% increase for one area, 29% increase in the other, and they say just keep dumping more money into it. We absolutely know, and my Democratic colleagues have told me privately, we know there's a lot of fraud, that there's money being sent to insurance companies, that they're then covering people that actually don't even know they have coverage just because it's cheap for the insurance companies. Everybody knows that exists in it, but they don't want to discuss that. They just want to add more money into it. We have people making $250,000 a year that are getting subsidies with these additional subsidies they created several years ago. And we've said, what in the world that people making $250,000 a year are getting these subsidies? We also know the way that my Democratic colleagues created these subsidies, they went around the Hyde Amendment, which has been very clear. Federal tax dollars do not go to pay for abortions, but they created this very creative system of tax credits so they could send money to insurance companies to pay for elective abortions. They're asking every Republican now to jump on board and to be able to vote for that. Listen, there are big issues with this. My Democratic colleagues say, well, just fund more health care, just take care of it. We know there's fraud. We know there's people making $500,000. We know there's abortion funding going. We know all these aspects. So no, we're not just going to dump more money into it. We've said something pretty straightforward. Let's keep the government open at its current status quo. And let's keep debating all these issues. But why should next week SNAP recipients no longer get SNAP benefits? Because there's a fight over all these healthcare issues on this that we have very strong actual policy issues with. Why are they cutting off SNAP benefits? Why are they telling this young couple with an infant child on the way, no, neither of you are going to get paid? Why is that happening? So here's what we've done. I proposed a bill that I put out last session. It was very straightforward. This bill just says we will never have another government shutdown. Never. Every time we get to another moment like this, automatic funding kicks in, but here's the kicker. Members of Congress are in session 7 days a week, and we can't do anything but appropriations. We've got to do appropriations, and we've got to be here 7 days a week, House and Senate, until we actually get this solved. And that seems like a pretty reasonable thing. My Democratic colleagues have been bemoaning the House is not in session. If you would have voted for my bill last session, we would all be here right now negotiating this out. I had 57 votes on that last session, 57. We were 3 votes short of never, ever having a government shutdown again, never. So I'm going to bring it again and to say, let's end the potential of government shutdowns ever. And let's actually stay here and debate the issues and to be able to work things out like grown-ups. In the meantime, until we can get that done and until we can get my Democratic colleagues to agree, my colleague Ron Johnson has brought forward a very simple proposal. Let's pay the people that are working. Like this young couple that I mentioned, they're still working, both of them. Let's pay them while they're working, while we continue to be able to negotiate this out. If you won't at least open the government, as we have the last 13 times, when we got to this moment and just have a continuing resolution, at least pay the people that are working. This is a baby step and an offer to our Democratic colleagues to say, let's at least do the minimum on this to not punish those folks. There are folks today that are on the road working for the federal government that are in critical positions that they're not being paid, and they're actually putting their expenses on their credit card, not knowing if they're going to get a chance to pay that off. It's not right. So let's take the steps. My recommendation is, long-term, let's never have a shutdown ever again. Let's fix the process. We were 3 votes short last session. Let's actually fix that permanently. Let's get us back open again. But at a minimum, let's at least, while we're arguing, pay federal workers that are still at the task. That should be the easiest threshold to be able to step over. Many of my colleagues are on the floor today because we want to get a chance to be able to offer this to our Democratic colleagues and say, we're going to reach an olive branch out to you. Let's get started on some things. So I yield the floor to my colleagues.
Mr. President,
Senator from Florida.
we are in day 23 of this shutdown, a shutdown that is sowing more uncertainty across our country by the day. It is one that is leaving our nation vulnerable to adversaries abroad and seeing our service members left wondering if their next paychecks will go through as they seek not only to protect us, but to support their families. A shutdown that my colleagues and I on the Republican side of the aisle voted for or against over a dozen times. We are trying to end this shutdown, yet we are blocked at every point. Along with a few, very few, courageous Democrats, we voted for a bipartisan continuing resolution to fund the government. The opposing Democrats do so while knowing they are voting against paying our troops for our security, against paying law enforcement for safety, and against paying so many other people that are necessary for critical functions. They vote no. Republicans have voted to eliminate future shutdowns to pay our service members and other essential federal workers and for a full year of funding our military. And yet each time these same colleagues blocked the efforts. They have now resorted to outright obstruction. I am the newest U.S. Senator from Florida, one of the newest U.S. Senators for our country. I've been here 9 months, and I am disgusted that we have colleagues coming in here voting against continuing funding, reciting poetry. They are putting poetry over paying our troops. Since my arrival in Washington, I have watched every single effort by the Democrats to oppose the will of the American people, to undo the outcome of the election, attempting to paralyze not only the administration, but our policy goals to get this country back on the right track. Now these tactics have evolved into obstructing government itself, to hold the pay of federal law enforcement and our military hostage, let alone the thousands of other federal employees who continue to show up and fulfill their duties without pay. Shockingly, even senators with states that have large federal workforces have set aside the interests of those families beholden to some radical agenda. I implore my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to remember the effects of this shutdown go well past the boundaries of D.C. In my home state of Florida, we're seeing crisis centers which serve veterans, law enforcement officers, first responders, some of our most vulnerable that encounter hardships, all because of colleagues have refused to open the government. In fact, I have committed to donating my salary every day the government is shut down to a crisis center in Florida because they are suffering as this continues to go on. The choice is simple for my colleagues at this point. Either you stand for this country, for our service members, and for actually governing this nation, or you stand against that. And finally, I want to take a moment to thank every single federal employee continuing to work without pay. Our service members, federal law enforcement officers, Coast Guard members, air traffic controllers, so many others, including our own staff, including the staff on the Senate floor that show up and stay up all night as the Democrats recite poetry. Thank you for showing up without pay. Thank you for your patriotism, your work ethic, your embrace of duty and commitment to this nation. Throughout history, it is the selfless work of patriots that help build and sustain this incredible country of ours. And I look forward to the day, Mr. President, when our colleagues on the other side of the aisle cease with their partisan games, that they put governing for the people back as their #1 priority, that they remember it is an incredible responsibility they undertook when they took the oath to become a senator. I hope they remember that they were trusted to do this in good faith on behalf of the people. And I hope that they join us in reopening the government. They join us in our bipartisan, clean, continuing resolution to reopen the government. That is the only way forward, and it is the sole path available to continue our work on behalf of the American people. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to all my colleagues here today. Now, as everybody, all the senators know, as all America knows, my friends across the aisle have kidnapped the federal government. In fact, they've now voted a dozen times not to reopen the government. And even surprising to most of us, twice they voted against funding the military during these challenging times. I think it's obvious to all America that this is a political shutdown, that this is showbiz to them. This is an opportunity for their left legacy media to shout and scream at President Trump and to kowtow to their far left Marxist base. Now, when you kidnap somebody or an entity, you have to have a ransom. Now, the opening ransom from the Democrats was an additional $1.5 trillion added to our national debt, borrowed from my grandchildren, $1.5 trillion. You know, it was just this week the federal government passed a $38 trillion level for our national debt. We're spending $1 trillion a year on interest alone. So that was the opening ransom. And now they seem to be locked in on throwing more money at a very broken ACA, the 24 million people on the ACA. But it's interesting to me how when they want to talk about healthcare, they hide behind rural hospitals. That they think, oh, we're going to help those, when 97% of rural America voted for President Trump. And under President Trump's leadership, in our big, beautiful bill, we have $50 billion of a health transformation fund for rural America, but the first thing the Democrats want to do is to take that away. It's maybe one of the most hypocritical statements I've ever heard. They want to help rural America, to help rural hospitals, but they want to take away this $50 billion transformation fund. And instead, they want to put all their eggs in one basket on Medicaid. Look, a hospital loses money every time they see a Medicaid patient. Every time a Medicaid patient walks into the emergency room, that hospital is losing money on that patient as well. And despite that, the Republicans in our big, beautiful bill increase spending on Medicaid to the tune of $200 billion a year. We need to work on getting people off Medicaid. Let's get them back to work. Help them get good health insurance as well. Now, their latest idea is that they want to throw more money at the ACA. They want to throw more money for the 24 million people on the ACA. Look, Democrats own health care. Right? The ACA's in the law of the land for 15 years. If any hospital fails today, tomorrow, next week, next year, the year after, if anybody's health premiums are going up, and they are, then it's on the backs of Democrats. The first thing you need to realize is when you're in a hole is to stop digging. When do they think we can stop throwing good money after bad money? Look, I want to fix health care. I want to drive down the cost of health care. Now, as my colleague from Oklahoma pointed out, the premiums for the ACA up 200% is what he mentioned. I think that's a pretty good number over the last 6 years. But beyond that, the average deductible for the ACA now is $5,000. Can you imagine you're a family of four, an average salary back in Kansas, $60,000 a year, and the Democrats think throwing more money at the ACA, which gives you a $5,000 deductible, is going to solve the problem. Well, of course it's not. So we need to address the affordability of the ACA, and we need to address the premiums, and then beyond that, we need to address the fraud. Look, this program has grown from a $50 billion a year projection by the famous Congressional Budget Office. They said it'd be $50 billion. We're spending $150 billion a year now on the ACA. And we think there's $25 to $50 billion of fraud in that. I think if you polled Americans and said, look, there's a federal program which is paying subsidies for people's premiums, but there's $50 billion of fraud in that, I think that Americans would say, hey, we sent you to Congress, to the Senate, to fix the darn problem, and we know how to do that. This is a simple fix. Not one time have Democrats have you heard a Democrat say, we want to fix what's broken in the ACA. No, all they want to do is throw more money at it. It would be so easy to fix the fraud, and we know how to do it. You know, how do we address the cost of health care? Well, it starts with adding price tags, right? Can you imagine walking into a restaurant and try and decide if you want the 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, onions on a sesame seed bun versus the 2 quarter pounders and didn't know the price difference? Well, of course you not. But that's what we're asking Americans to do when they have a procedure done. They have no idea what it's going to cost. They have no idea what outcomes are. Americans need to realize that you could have a surgery done in one facility for, let's say it's a hip replacement. Maybe one hospital gets replaced $10,000, but another one they're reimbursing at $50,000. I'm not making those numbers up. I ran a hospital. Those were the exact numbers just 6 or 7 years ago. And by the way, the hospital that was getting reimbursed the lower amount had better outcomes, less infections, less blood clots. Look, the Democrats own health care right now. These are their policies. When they're ready to do something more than just throw money at one of the most broken systems in the history of America, then we're here to talk to you. But first of all, we need to open the federal government. Thanks, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm pleased to join my colleagues today. Mr. President, today marks the 23rd day of the government shutdown, the 23rd day, now the second longest in our nation's history. Yet despite the mounting consequences, our colleagues across the aisle continue to block a clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution, one that would simply keep the government open and allow us to continue our work on the appropriations process. To be clear, there are no Republican priorities included in the CR. Let me repeat again. There are no Republican priorities included in the CR. It simply keeps the government funded. It is the same kind of CR that Democrats passed 13 times under President Biden, yet now they refuse to vote for it. Let's just take a minute to review. Here are the 13 clean CRs that were passed during the Biden administration. 13 of them. You can count them. Oh, gee, how did the Democrats vote? I don't know. Let's check. Well, here's the percentage of Democrats that voted for each of those 13 clean CRs during the Biden administration. Now, Mr. President, from sitting way back there, I know your eyes are pretty good. Former Navy SEALs, so they might be diminished a little bit by now, so I'm going to help you out here. On the first one, 100% of the Democrats voted for it. On the second one, 100% of the Democrats voted for it. On the third one, 100% of the Democrats, same kind of clean CR we're looking at right now, but it was under Biden. That's the difference. Oh, third one, 100% of the Democrats. Fourth one, 100% of the Democrats voted for the clean CR. On the fifth one, 100% of the Democrats voted for the clean CR. On the sixth one, 100% of the Democrats voted for a clean CR, the same kind that none of them will vote for now. Well, I guess we've got 3. But we've got to get enough to get 60 votes. Oh, let's see, I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I'm number 7. 100% of the Democrats voted for it. The eighth one, 100% of the Democrats voted for it. Now, on the ninth one, I don't know what happened. Maybe one of them was gone. Who knows? But gee whiz, we dropped all the way down to, we only got 98% of the Democrats on that one. Only 98% voted for that one. But the good news is they were right back on the next one, 100%. I think that's number 10, 100% on number 11, 100% on number 12, and gee whiz, they finished with only 98% of the Democrats on the 13th one. You kind of get the point maybe, right? Come on. What in the world's going on here? And then they have the gall to go out there and say, oh, well, you know, they're not shutting down the government. It's ridiculous. I don't know how there can be any doubt about it. And for anybody that thinks that this shutdown should be stopped right now, they better call their favorite Democrat on the phone and say, hey, it's time. It's way, way, way past time. But right now, instead, our colleagues across the aisle have chosen the different path. They've taken our government hostage, demanding more than $1 trillion in new spending just to keep the lights on. $1 trillion just to keep the lights on. And to pay people, federal employees, military, everybody else that's working. That is not compromise, Mr. President. That's called coercion. That is not compromise. That is coercion. That's holding our government hostage. And while this political stalemate drags on, American families are paying the price. Vital programs that hardworking families rely on, programs they've paid into and depend on, have been shuttered or are dangerously close to running out of money. Several states are now warning that they will be forced to shut down SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, as soon as November 1st if the shutdown continues. That means millions of Americans could lose access to the assistance that helps them put food on the table. Meanwhile, our economy is losing $15 billion in GDP each week as long as this shutdown persists. Many federal employees, including critical air traffic controllers, they're working, they're not getting paid. How about our Border Patrol agents? It can be a pretty dangerous job. They're not getting paid. They're working, they're not getting paid. Or how about this group? Our troops. Mr. President, you were a Navy SEAL. You were in harm's way. We've got people in harm's way, and they're not getting paid because now the Democrats want to say somehow this clean CR shouldn't be voted for, and that somehow they're cooperating, they're trying to collaborate, when instead they're holding our government hostage. In rural America, our farmers, ranchers get left behind. Many of them are out in the field right now, harvesting, working on bringing in their crops, getting ready for next year. Programs, services they depend on with USDA they can't access. That means more uncertainty at a time when they can least afford it. Look, the list goes on and on. It goes on and on and on and on. But the bottom line is this. We need to get government. We have offered over and over again, as my colleague said, to work on any and all issues. But you do it once you get the government open. This has gone on, I'd say long enough, but actually way too long. And I don't know at what point Democrats are going to decide to come back and start doing their job, which is governing. But we are eagerly awaiting it. And for the American people are the ones that pay the price when the Democrats take our government hostage. And as I've made very clear here, there is no doubt, but that is exactly what they are doing. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank my friend from North Dakota. We see things slightly different, but one thing I think we'd probably agree on. You know who is getting paid? The House of Representatives, who's been on vacation since the middle of September. And gosh, wouldn't it be great if they were actually on the floor debating this issue as well, as opposed to getting a taxpayer-paid vacation for over a month? But, you know, Mr. President, I think one of the things we would all kind of agree on, our nation's public servants are not political pawns. I say with due respect to my friend from Wisconsin, you know, the so-called Shutdown Fairness Act, in my view, is anything but fair. And frankly, this entire year has been anything but fair for all of our federal employees who show up every single day to serve the American people. Because remember, before Russ Vought even set foot in the Office of Management and Budget, he bragged that he wanted federal workers, his words, not mine, increasingly be viewed as villains and put them in trauma. Think about that. This wasn't some political misstatement or slip of the tongue. It's frankly a mission statement. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we've seen from Mr. Vought, from President Trump, and from those enabling him. In just 9 months, they've forced out or driven into early retirement more than 148,000 federal employees. That's not efficiency or reform. It's an assault on the very people who work every day for the American people. and God knows we can improve, but also make government perform. Now, let's be clear. It's not this side of the aisle, Democrats, who have cherry-picked a few favorite programs to protect. We have been consistent on calling on the administration totally reckless regard for vital services the American people rely on to keep them safe and secure, and standing up for those folks who deliver those services. So forgive me, Mr. President, when I say I don't think the Shutdown Fairness Act has anything to do with fairness. Once again, federal employees are being treated not as partners serving the American people, but as punching bags for vote and the president's political agenda. Right now, the president is trying to riff another 4,000 federal employees. Not just, I believe, unfairly, but actually illegally based upon a court's recent decision. And thank goodness the courts have stepped in. Matter of fact, many of us were at the OMB headquarters across next to the White House just last week, meeting with federal employees, demanding Mr. Vogt and his team listen, not to us, you don't have to listen to us, we're on political different sides, but listen to the very federal workers whose jobs, and make sure they would get the government reopened, not trying to leverage this for some kind of political win. We're talking about special education programs that support kids with disabilities. We're talking about the CDC, whose experts track outbreaks and try to keep us safe. We're talking about a program called the CDFI Fund at Treasury, a program which broad bipartisan support that helps invest and get access to capital in rural communities and urban communities. And again, on this one, I got to thank particularly Mike Crapo, but a whole lot of my Republican colleagues for being willing to push back. Let's be crystal clear. These actions are not some accident. This is a deliberate choice, a deliberate effort to hold federal workers hostage in order to jam through an agenda that at the end of the day is going to drive up health care costs for millions of Americans. Instead of sitting down with us and working to keep premiums affordable, they're using these very federal workers, and I got a ton of them in Virginia, as political pawns. It's wrong, it's cruel, and it's not going to work. That's why I'm proud to join both the ranking member, Peters, who will be here, I believe, shortly, and my good friend from Maryland, Senator Van Hollen, on legislation to ensure that not the Trump administration pick and choose who we ought to go ahead and pay, but legislation to ensure that all federal workers, and by the way, and the contractors who work side by side with them, get paid during this shutdown. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a moment for every senator to decide. Are you going to stand with the federal workers who keep the government running, or are you going to stand with those who want to traumatize them and make them all be viewed as villains? This is an actual chance. In a few minutes, we're going to have to make sure that those workers can feed their families, pay their mortgages, while this Republican shutdown drags on. I mean, a lot of language on this floor about who wants to support federal workers. Well, you're going to shortly have a chance, every senator will have a chance to prove whether they're on the side of not selectively paying federal workers, but paying all federal workers as we try to bring this shutdown to an end. I urge my colleague to do the right thing. Let's get it done. And I thank Senator Van Hollen for his leadership on this issue. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Maryland.
I want to thank my colleague from Virginia, Senator Warner, and other colleagues who are joining together to support the proposal that we are putting forward today. But I think we should all say that the best way to make sure that federal employees, all federal employees, get paid and that the American people get the benefit of their services is to reopen the federal government and do it now, which is why I and my Democratic colleagues have voted 7 times now to reopen the government without giving Donald Trump a blank check and while making sure that we prevent a health care crisis in this country when people's health care premiums and costs go through the roof. Because when Republicans passed their so-called big, beautiful bill, They extended the tax breaks for billionaires and very wealthy people. The one tax cut they did not extend was the one that allows middle-class families to afford health insurance. And so they left in place a ticking time bomb that's going off now. We'd like to defuse that time bomb. Instead of negotiating on that, the president has been AWOL. He has been engaged in discussions overseas regarding the Middle East, been on the phone a lot with Vladimir Putin. That's all good, but you would think the President of the United States could carve out just a little time to help reopen the government, to have a negotiation on reopening the federal government. Instead, he's bringing down Republican members of the House and Senate to the White House and whining and dining them and patting them on the back and saying, good job for, keeping this government shut down and not entering into a negotiation to bring it to a close. And of course, our House colleagues, the Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson, has essentially got the House on a 5-week now, I don't know if we're on 6 weeks, paid vacation. I mean, they are AWOL here in the middle of this shutdown. What is the president focused on? He's asking the Justice Department to pay him $230 million for legal bills, right, directly into his pocket. He's talking about giving his buddy in Argentina a $20 billion taxpayer bailout while farmers across the country are getting hit hard because they can't sell their soybeans to China. And he's demolishing the East Wing of the White House, which is a metaphor for what he is doing to the country and people who worked for him to get him elected. I mean, he's betraying the very people he said he was going to stand up for when he said he was going to focus on prices and costs. And yet, when it comes to trying to just prevent this huge spike in healthcare costs that our people are experiencing, the president doesn't want to talk about it. So we should not be punishing federal employees for something they had nothing to do with. They're not responsible. They're innocent bystanders. They all want to get back on the job and provide services to the American people. And I'll be putting forth a proposal to say that they should not be punished and they should be paid. Now, we'll hear later today, we're going to be taking up here in the Senate a piece of legislation from Senator Johnson. And that proposal would pay federal employees who are currently working right now. Our proposal doesn't discriminate among federal employees. And here's the really dangerous part, I would argue, about Senator Johnson's proposal. We have a president, President Trump, who, along with Russ Vought, who's his guy in the cockpit at OMB, this is the guy who said publicly that he wanted to inflict trauma, that's his word, not mine, inflict trauma on the federal workforce. If you allow them to decide who they're going to keep on the job in the federal government and who they're going to pay, you're giving them also a blank check as to who they're going to send home and who they're going to punish by not paying. That's what they've been doing. Much of what they've been doing is illegal. In fact, we have a federal court in California that's already said that their layoffs of some of the federal employees and some of the agencies are illegal. But if you just let them decide who's going to get paid and who's not, you weaponize that illegality. You weaponize the federal government. And by the way, and I think we all know this, if President Trump gets to keep the folks he wants on the job and pay the folks that he wants who are on the job and nobody else, he'll have even less incentive to end the government shutdown. He'll have the government he wants, not the one that has been supported on a bipartisan basis by the United States Congress. So giving the president a blank check to decide which federal employees to punish and which ones not to punish is a very dangerous thing at this moment. That's why the proposal I'm putting forward, and Senator Peters will have a an even narrower version that he will be put forward if our Republican colleagues don't support the one that I'm advancing along with Senator Warner, Senator Kaine, Senator Alsobrooks, and others. These proposals say that federal employees should not be punished. Now, we've already made that decision. We've already made that decision as a Congress in the past. During the first Trump shutdown, that was the 35-day Trump shutdown. During that shutdown, Senator Cardin, myself, and others, we passed a piece of legislation that was signed by the president that says at the end of a shutdown, federal employees get fully paid. They're held harmless. Why did we decide to do that? Because we collectively made the right decision that federal employees who have nothing to do with the government shutdown should not be the ones punished for something they were not culpable in. That was the right decision. What my proposal and our proposal will do is based on that idea that no federal employee should be punished for something they had nothing to do with. And not only should they get repaid at the end of this, but why would we say to them that you can't have enough pay to make your electric bills, or pay your water bills, or provide for your family? Why should federal employees be the ones who are punished for the government shutdown? Why should they be the ones that have to overdraft their bank accounts, be penalized for that? That's not fair. So the proposals that we're putting forward say that in this government shutdown, federal employees and, yes, certain federal contractors who have nothing to do with this political situation that we face, they should not be the ones to bear the burden. And we certainly shouldn't set up a system where the President of the United States gets to decide what agencies to shut down, what they can open, who to pay and who not to pay, who to punish, who not to punish. That just gives him a blank check to put in place political cronies and pay them, and send home hardworking civil servants who perform important functions. So that's what our proposal will do. And for any of our colleagues, regardless of the side of the aisle, who agree that federal employees should not be the ones who are punished for something they got nothing to do with, I hope we'll all agree to support this measure. Now, I don't know if Mr. President, Senator Peters wants to talk at all on this particular proposal. He's going to be talking on the next proposal. I know that some of my colleagues are on the way to the floor as we speak. Senator Kaine and others. And I will, when they arrive, I will return the floor to them to have say their piece. But at this time, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 3039, introduced earlier today, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, I've come here today on the floor in good faith. I've come here not to argue. I've come here trying to find agreement. And I've listened to the senator from Virginia, now the senator from Maryland, and I have to say, I don't know exactly what percentage, but probably 98% of what they've said, I agree with. Now, I do have to point out, and this would be the most, I would say this is a partisan comment. We have voted now 12 times on a measure that would open up government. It's what the House passed as a clean CR, similar if not identical to what happened 13 times during the Biden administration, just a clean CR to open up the government at President Biden's levels, funding levels that Democrats voted for. By the way, House Republicans could have come with a table to a CR with $1.5 trillion of spending reductions to match the $1.5 trillion of spending increase the Democrats wanted,
And now there'd be areas of compromise, but the House Republicans basically said, here's the deal. Let's not shut down government. But let's not make federal government workers pay for our dysfunction. So they passed a clean CR, the President Biden's funding levels. So again, that's been voted down 12 times, regrettably. But let me set that aside. I found out about the Senator from Maryland's proposal last night. Got the language this morning. I've got the bill here. And first of all, I kind of chuckled because the name of the bill is I've actually got the true Warren Buffett tax, and we ought to talk about that later on. You might find that interesting. But so he's taken my bill, the Shutdown Fairness Act. Now his bill is the True Shutdown Fairness Act. And again, I haven't done a word count comparison, but it's probably like 95+% of the Shutdown Fairness Act. That's a good thing. That shows there's a lot of areas of agreement. I come from the private sector. You don't get a whole lot accomplished arguing all the time. It's all about finding areas of agreement. I got a product, you want to buy it, now we'll haggle over the price. Okay, so I got a product, you want to buy it, now we need to haggle over the price. Now, the three areas of the differences in these bills, I think I've got this right. I'd asked the Senator from Maryland to confirm that. Your bill is only for this fiscal year. My bill would just end this, punishing federal workers for our dysfunction forever. I mean, I think we should make it permanent. The Senator from Maryland's bill includes furloughed employees. Now, the fact of the matter is, when all this is said and done, when we finally end this dysfunction, we fund government through an appropriation, because the 2019 Government Fair Treatment Act, the Government Fair Treatment Act, they'll get paid anyway. So my bill is obviously targeted to the people we're forcing to work, but I'm not necessarily opposed to paying furloughed workers as well. That's something we can talk about, okay? The last difference is it limits reduction in force. Now, I come from the private sector. Nobody likes to terminate employees. Nobody. But in the private sector, when a business is facing bankruptcy, sometimes business owners are forced to do that to preserve the other jobs. The federal government is $38 trillion in debt. I don't think we should limit the president's ability, the chief executive's ability to properly manage the federal government and make the tough decisions sometimes to reduce the workforce, cut out some government functions. But again, that's something we can talk about. So again, I think, in fairness of the more than 2 million in federal employees that are now being forced to work because they're termed accepted, but that means they're essential. They're protecting our nation. They're protecting our safety and security. They're writing Social Security checks. To see that they get their paycheck so they don't have to work DoorDash, so they don't have to go to food banks, so they're not under that stress. I am asking in good faith, let's figure out how to get that done. Now, I mean, I could propose, take this, I'll change the name of mine, by the way, if you want to call it the True, because I think it's the True Shutdown Fairness Act. I would be, today, right now, I'd be willing to add furloughed workers, because we're going to pay them anyway. Would you, I'm just asking, I mean, would you substitute your bill, take my bill, substitute it in? I've actually got my staff to write the language to do this. Red line is probably not ready for prime time. We really need to get through Ledge Council, that kind of stuff. But would you take my bill, add furloughed workers, say it's a done deal? Is that something you'd accept here today?
I'm happy to, if you're yielding the floor to me.
Yes.
The short answer is we do want to pay all federal employees because none of them should be punished. But we also don't want them to be fired and riffed during this period of time. I mean, you said in the private sector, people don't like to fire employees. I know, Senator, you've read the remarks of Russ Vought, the head of OMB. he wants to visit, quote, trauma on federal employees, and he wants to fire a lot of them. He has said so.
That's, again,
but that's an important piece here, right?
So, Senator, again, I'm trying to keep this. Let's not argue, okay? Let's focus on areas of agreement. So even reduction in force, okay? Again, I think we probably have a philosophical agreement there. I'm not associating myself with anybody else's remarks. I'm just talking about that's something that I think reasonable people can disagree with. And I think reasonable people can come to an accommodation. Again, when we're talking about making sure that 2.8, I think is about the number, 2.8 million federal employees aren't worried about getting a next paycheck. I mean, that so overwhelms, quite honestly, the smaller differences about the length of the bill or, what reduction in force. Again, and I'm willing to come a long way.
Senator,
I'm willing to come a long way in terms of including furloughed workers. So again, what I'm suggesting is the way to do it. And by the way, this could be a wonderful example for this body. Working on a piece of legislation that, again, you bring it to the floor. We filed it. I know it got Rule 14, but we're doing it the right way. We're going to ask for a cloture vote on it. Get it on the floor, open it up to amendments, perfect it. See what the body of the Senate wants to do with this piece of legislation that, again, we probably agree 95% of it or higher. The way to do it is when I offer my bill and we vote on cloture, vote for cloture. Let's get on the bill. Let's start discussing today. I mean, maybe if we're so successful, maybe if we find the differences are so slight, we can pass it by UC later in the day. But we do need to take this back to our conferences. We do need to go to ledge staff. We need to perfect this. It'll probably take more time. But again, passing it by unanimous consent is not the way to do it. It just isn't. I mean, I appreciate the attempt. I appreciate the dialogue. And that's not what I'm asking. In all sincerity, for the benefit of those 2.8 million workers, our military, our law enforcement, let's take that burden off them today. Let's give them some hope to know this body is going to finally do something in a nonpartisan, I call it a nonpartisan way, that we all agree on. We're going to iron out our differences the way you would generally do it, the way it used to be done, by getting onto a bill, voting for cloture, having the will of the Senate work its way, and then hopefully pass it early next week. That would be my suggestion. Again, I'd be willing to do it today. I don't think we could probably handle that because there's things to discuss. That's all I'm asking.
If gentlemen will yield, look, thank you. Look, it'd be great to work this out because there seems to be some agreement that federal employees should not be the ones to bear the burden of a decision they had nothing to do with. I see the Republican leaders here with us on the floor. I think the best way to proceed would be to delay moving forward on the cloture vote on the motion to proceed on your bill, and let's sit down and let's talk about whether or not we can find that common ground. We may not be that far apart. I will just say to the senator, that if you give the president the authority, as your proposal currently does, to decide who to send home and furlough and punish, and it sounds like you're willing to change that, but here's the scenario I worry about. If you listen to Russ Vought and the president, they would just fire those people during the shutdown. That's what they're doing. In fact, they're illegally firing people during the shutdown.
Again, Senator, I really didn't want to come and argue.
Okay, well, why don't we sit down? Why don't we sit down together?
I have to dispute that because even the National Active and Retired Federation Employees Association, who's endorsed my bill, says the bill does not single out favored political functions over disfavored ones. And you understand, under the Anti-Deficiency Act, under the opinions from the Office of Legal Counsel, accepted employees, it's pretty well standard. There may be some tweaks back and forth, which is what you give the latitude of the executive branch. Again, I'm willing to sit down. I'm sure the Republican Congress is willing to sit down and go, okay, what should we do? I think Congress has given way too much authority to the executive branch. I don't mind dialing that back a little bit. But again, the way to approach that is let's get on the bill. Let's talk about it. Let's offer amendments, amendments that pass by voice vote. and let's get it done. There's a lot of pressure on all of us. We all want to get this done. But again, passing by unanimous consent is not the way to get it done. The way to get it done is the way the process should work. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to actually see the process work in the Senate? Again, I realize you don't agree 100% on my bill. So
I would love to see the process work.
And then let's sit down in good faith, let's hammer out amendments, and let's get the thing passed next week. Let's do that. That's all I'm asking. Again, I honestly hate to object to this. I don't want to, okay? But again, this is not the way to pass it. So again, I'll speak to my bill. I know we've got to get votes for that kind of stuff. But again, truthfully, I'm in as good a faith as I possibly can be. We have to get this done. And the way to do that is vote to get on the bill. Let's sit down and talk in good faith, and let's see and hammer out what it might be pretty minor differences when all's said and done, okay? But with that...
Well, let me just say, Mr. President, just to say to the Senator Johnson, I'm more than happy to sit down with you. I think we should do that maybe later today, get our teams together, see if we can resolve some of these points. Because if we have the shared view that, number one, no federal employee should be punished for something they had nothing to do with, and that at least for the period of the shutdown, the president should not be able to fire additional people, which is, I think you well know, and this was partly considered by the federal court already, the president actually has less authority to do in a shutdown than when the government's open. But I don't want to debate these issues on the floor right now.
Sure.
I am more than happy to try and sit down with your team and see if we can
Let me
resolve.
quick address that. I think this brinkmanship has got to end here. I mean, I've been here 15 years. We should have passed 180 appropriation bills. Before the start of the fiscal year, we've passed 6. Again, a lot of people working in good faith to do that, okay? It's obviously broken. We've got to start working on appropriation and budget reform. We've got to start working on that together, okay? But my guess is part of what's happening with reduction in force is that brinkmanship, trying to get you folks to just agree to what you've done 13 times. Just open up the government, then we'll talk, okay? We're more than open to talk. But anyway, so again, I'm literally begging you, please.
Well,
when we vote on cloture, vote to get on the bill, and then let's go through the amendment process, and let's get it done quick. Again, there's not that big a difference. We can get this done, but again, I hate to do this, but with that, I will object, and just, again, beg.
Objection heard.
Let's
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
As I said to the senator from Wisconsin, I'm happy to sit down with him and his team to see if we can put together a proposal based on the principle that no federal employee should have to bear the burden and the pain of a decision they had nothing to do with, as well as many of these federal contractors who are also involved. So I welcome the chance to sit down with the senator from Wisconsin. I also hope that the President of the United States will sit down with Democrats to resolve the overall issue and open the government. That way, we wouldn't even have to go through this exercise right now. With that, I want to yield the floor to my colleague from Maryland, Senator Alsobrooks.
Senator from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. President, thank you, first of all, to my colleague, Senator Chris Van Hollen, for yielding. And I also want to thank the senior senator from Maryland for his work on this legislation, the True Shutdown Fairness Act. Senator Van Hollen is a tremendous partner on this critical issue and an advocate for the thousands of federal workers in our great state. Maryland is home to 494,000 federal workers and federal contractors and 34,000 uniformed military personnel. Many of these Marylanders have spent their lives serving their fellow Americans, fighting to defend our country, ensuring our food and water are safe, making sure our parents and grandparents get their Social Security checks, and researching cures to cancer. That they have been characterized by this administration as an enemy worthy of trauma is repugnant. If you live in Maryland, you know a federal worker. They are your friends, they're your neighbors, they are the people like my grandmother, Sarah Daisy. You see, Sarah Daisy worked as a housekeeper in Washington, D.C., but dreamed her entire life of working in the federal government. Back then, and many will recall, she had to pass a civil servants exam, which included a typing test in order to work in the federal government. But she couldn't afford a typewriter and didn't know how to type. So she taped a white piece of paper on her refrigerator. She drew a keyboard on that piece of paper and stood in front of her refrigerator in her one-bedroom apartment every night and taught herself the keystrokes. Well, Sarah Daisy passed the exam and got herself a job working in the federal government. It was her dream. She worked in the Hoeven building. She'd always tell me about it. I could vividly remember her saying that she was so proud that she walked past this general and that general in the hallway. She was very, very proud. And I am honored to be her legacy and to be fighting for the countless Marylanders just like Sarah Daisy, who are being so cruelly targeted by this administration. Now, thanks to Republicans in this body who have chosen to follow this president's order and shut down the government, many of our federal workers are working without pay, still in service to our country. The rest have been furloughed to no fault of their own. Our ask today is simple: pay them for the jobs that they were hired to do. We are now in day 23 of this Republican shutdown, and let us not mince words. Republicans hold the keys to the kingdom. They have control over the White House. They have majorities in this chamber and in the House. And what have they done with that power? Has the cost of your groceries gone down? No. Has the cost of housing gone down? No. Has our economy gotten stronger? Absolutely not. What have they done? Shut down the government. That's it. This shutdown is on them. We know it, they know it, and the American people know it. It's been 23 days of this administration refusing to come to the table in good faith and negotiate a plan to keep the government open and make sure that health care is affordable and accessible for millions of Americans. It's been 23 days of this administration using the shutdown as an excuse to further target federal workers who are my constituents. My state is home to 494,000 federal workers and contractors. All of them are feeling the pain from this president's refusal to do what he supposedly loves to do best: make a deal. Right before the shutdown began, the very sinister Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought instructed agencies to use a shutdown as an opportunity to issue permanent government layoffs. Vought then began circulating a memo that would seem to challenge the legality of furloughed workers receiving back pay. By the way, Congress passed a bipartisan law ensuring their back pay during the last Trump administration, yet this administration continues to disregard the rule of law. Just last week, Vought ominously tweeted, "The rifts have begun." He then directed federal agencies to begin illegally terminating thousands of federal employees. This is a man who is outwardly and very sinisterly, in a very sinister way, taking pleasure in harming federal workers. Hours later, President Trump and Secretary Kennedy fired more than 1,700 more people from the Department of Health and Human Services, including staffers that work to prevent measles outbreaks, before admitting that they had sent nearly half of the notices to employees at the CDC in error. Imagine that. With the family to support, you get a notice that you're fired before getting another email hours later telling you that your RIF has been rescinded. The chaos and the cruelty is unconscionable. Thousands of dedicated civil servants have been shown the door by an administration who, in the words of the Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought, has said that it is his intention. He said that he hopes that federal workers will no longer want to come to work because they will be in so much trauma. He also said that he hoped that they would feel like villains. So there has been a systemic dismantling of our federal government, a witch hunt targeting patriotic people across this country who raised their hand to serve the American people. All of this chaos is needless. It is a manufactured crisis. So many Marylanders would like to show up to work today and serve the American people, but they have been left behind by this administration. Hundreds of thousands of civil servants have been either furloughed or forced to work without pay, all because this president has decided to shut down the government instead of lower health care costs for Americans. We need to ensure our workers are paid. The truth of the matter is that we are now just 9 days away from open enrollment beginning, when Americans will begin to sign up for their health care plans for next year. And they are already facing sticker shock. Even with the state stepping in, a 60-year-old couple living in Salisbury, Maryland, making $90,000 a year, will pay $1,100 more per month for health care. They will have to pay $1,100 more per month next year. For a family of 4 in Maryland making around $128,000 a year, and for context, that's the combined salary of a firefighter and a teacher, they will be paying $1,427 per month next year versus $916 this year. If the president and our colleagues on the other side of the aisle get their wish and allow the tax credits to expire, nearly 90,000 Marylanders could be priced out of their health insurance altogether. So we will keep fighting for health care because it's what Americans deserve. But this chaos is unsustainable, and we must have faith that soon this season will be over. I know soon there will be a morning, not like the morning that we have awakened to today. Today's morning brings about chaos and fear and confusion and division. But I know soon there will be another morning where Americans will wake up across our country and not fear that they will not be able to afford rent, groceries, and health care. Right now, it is our duty as members of the United States Senate to pay our federal workers. Our government will cease to function if we do not, and the damage, I fear, is irreparable. Yet, just like Russ Vogt, my colleagues today are picking winners and losers, putting forth legislation that would only make sure that accepted workers are paid, instead of the entirety of the federal and military workforce that has been held hostage by this Republican shutdown. We cannot cherry pick who gets paid during a shutdown based on our perception of the political affiliations of our patriotic civil servants. We must pass legislation that ensures our federal workers receive the paychecks that they have earned. Around 750,000 federal employees have been furloughed this month at no fault of their own. Hundreds of thousands of these employees live in our region, in Maryland, in Virginia, and the district. Senator Johnson's bill would ignore these dedicated workers, leaving them to continue to go without a paycheck while President Trump refuses to get back to the bargaining table. They cannot afford to wait for the president to tire of throwing celebratory picnics or tearing down the White House for a gilded ballroom. They cannot afford to wait for Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to actually show back up to work. In case some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have forgotten, federal workers don't just serve Democrats. They serve every American citizen who needs their help. Researching cures for cancer isn't just for people who live in blue states. Making sure that people get their Social Security checks isn't some left-wing conspiracy. I would assume that everyone in this body agrees that Americans should get paid for their labor. Well, if you believe that, you will support our bill. It took courage and dedication for my grandmother, Sarah Daisy, to learn a new skill of her country. And each day, our armed service members and civil servants show courage and dedication to serve and protect our country from harm, to make it a better place. Let's show courage today. Work together and pay all federal workers, because we all know federal workers are Republicans, Democrats, and independents. They are not political pawns, they are patriots. I yield.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that myself and Senator Johnson be permitted to complete our remarks prior to the scheduled roll call vote.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to request unanimous consent to pass my Military and Federal Employees Protection Act. I understand my colleague from Wisconsin objected to Senator Van Hollen's proposal, and while I support my colleague from Maryland's legislation, I'm now going to offer an alternative that is very, very straightforward. It seems to me that we all agree in this chamber that we want to pay our federal workers. My bill will do just that and nothing else. The Military and Federal Employee Protection Act provides pay for members of the military, federal employees, and federal contractors who have been denied paychecks during the government shutdown. So let's be honest why we're all here. The shutdown is not an accident. Republicans right now are refusing to negotiate with Democrats on a bipartisan solution to help address the health care crisis. And now, as a result of that, federal workers are paying a price. My bill ensures that no worker is left behind during this difficult period. Congress has already guaranteed that all employees receive their paycheck when a shutdown ends. In 2019, Congress voted overwhelmingly for a bill to provide all employees back pay once a shutdown ends, and actually President Trump signed that bill into law. So the government is already required to pay all of its workers. What my bill does is very simply just ensure that these workers can actually now pay their bills that are coming due this month. Those bills aren't going to be postponed. They need to be paid this month. And while I appreciate my colleagues' interest to ensure that all workers are paid, I appreciated the comments that Senator Johnson made. My legislation will provide pay for all service members, federal employees, and contractors that have missed paychecks due to the shutdown. But it doesn't do other stuff that his bill does, which gives President Trump an unlimited blank check to pick winners and losers. We're just focused on what I think all of us agree on. This legislation that I'm offering is the absolute simplest path forward to pay our workers. We all say we agree on this, so let's just pass this bill now, get workers their paycheck. I'm going to continue to work to end this shutdown and address the health care crisis, but in the meantime, let's protect our service members and our federal employees, not put other stuff in the bill, just pay them so they can meet their bills as they arise. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S3043, introduced earlier today, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. President, again, I'll condense my remarks because so much of what I want to say I already said to the senator from Maryland. I think it's interesting that the senator from Michigan supports the senator from Maryland's bill, which is a more comprehensive bill, I think, as I, again, only saw this now, but hopefully I get it right, but I think yours is just limited to the time period from the shutdown until the bill is passed, and then we're in the same situation. If the shutdown continues, hopefully it won't. There's a way of doing it. Just vote for the clean CR. But again, I really don't want to object to these bills, but in this case, understand that the way to pass this into law, and as I was speaking to the senator from Maryland as he exited the chamber, wouldn't this be a wonderful demonstration for the Senate, for Congress, for America, of how you pass a piece of legislation? You take a bill, again, I realize you don't 100% agree with my Shutdown Fairness Act, fine, but I think we're probably 90+% agreement on it. So you vote for cloture to get on the bill, then you work in good faith on the areas of disagreement, let the Senate work its will through an amendment process. And again, this is a pretty small little piece of legislation. It's an incredibly important piece of legislation, incredibly important, because we all agree we don't want to make federal employees pay for the dysfunction of this body. So let's first demonstrate that this body can actually function the way it's intended to function, which is write a bill, get it filed, have the leader file cloture on it, have the body vote to proceed to the bill with 60 votes. You don't need all of you. We need about, we need 7 of you, 8 of you, okay? Have 8 of you agree to get on the bill, then we'll work in good faith, and we'll make sure that we don't make federal employees pay for our dysfunction. So again, I do have to object, but again, I'm urging, I'm begging colleagues from the other side of the aisle, vote for cloture, and let's iron out these differences, and let's make the federal employees, let's make them whole. But I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan is recognized.
So I appreciate the comments from my colleague from Wisconsin. We have worked together on a lot of bills together. We have come together to find common ground on some, at times, contentious issues. And I agree about the 90% comment that Senator Johnson mentioned. What I'm actually proposing right now is that 90%. It is really simple. This is as simple a bill as you can get. We can show the American people that we come together on a bill that's really straightforward, no gotchas, no language that might trip people up. It's simply pay folks, make sure that they're made whole as this passes so they can pay their bills, and then we can continue to deal with the other issues of the day. But I think this would be an example of bipartisan coming together unanimously to say that here is a bill that will pay service members and federal employees and contractors, make them whole so they can make their bills. We don't need to have a protracted process. This is a simple issue if we focus on the 90% we agree on, and that's what this bill is. It is the 90%, and I hope we could just pass it today and put the minds at ease of hundreds of thousands of folks all across the country.
Senator from Wisconsin.
So I think now we're going to proceed to the cloture vote on the Shutdown Fairness Act. Just in response real quick, it's unrealistic to expect almost any piece of legislation to pass by unanimous consent a bill that's just been introduced that exact morning. No matter how simple it is, there's going to be people that are going to object. So that's why the process is file a bill, file for cloture, to proceed to, get on the bill, have an amendment process, and go through that process. Now, it can go very quickly, but again, doing this by unanimous consent is just unreasonable. And so that's unfortunate. So again, the solution here is vote for cloture to get on the bill, the Shutdown Fairness Act. Now, I will try and keep my remarks reasonably short. I was allotted 20 minutes, but I know people are already here on the floor to vote, so I'm mindful of that. But just quick little history of my experience here since I got here in 2011. We've had, this is our 4th shutdown now, we're in the 23rd day. We've had 55 continuing resolutions. And most of them, again, I haven't voted for all of them, I've voted for many of them. Other colleagues on both sides have voted for those. I mean, generally the fight is over, let's just have a clean CR. Let's not junk it up with policies. And there's, that's the loggerhead here. One side refused to just do a clean CR. We've had 12 either increases or suspensions of the debt ceiling, and we've just surpassed $38 trillion in debt. I realize people work in good faith on the budget process. I'm on the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee. I see the former chair and ranking member of the Appropriations Committee on the floor here. The sad fact is, since I've been here, we should have passed 180 appropriation bills prior to the end of the fiscal year that we're going to fund. We've only passed 6. That's a 96.7% failure rate. It's clearly broken. The budget and appropriation process is broken. Rather than spending weeks arguing over how to get the government back open, I'd much rather sit down in a nonpartisan way and go, how can we fix this? Can we go to 2-year appropriation cycles? I mean, what can we do the budget? I mean, I'd much rather talk about that and understand that there's a lot of bipartisan agreement on proposals, but we'll never get to that if we're literally mired. Last year, it took us 6 months to finally fund the government with a continuing resolution. This is beyond ridiculous. So again, this is a bipartisan problem here. I'm not placing blame anywhere. It's a bipartisan problem. Now, unfortunately, we haven't passed any appropriations. Pointed out before, the Democrats have forwarded 13 times during the Biden administration for a clean CR at Biden spending levels. Now they're saying no, they won't. And of course, their leader, in doing that, on January 16, 2024, said, quote, passing a clean CR this week is important for two main reasons. First, passing the CR will avert a harmful and unnecessary government shutdown. No reasonable member of either side, Democrat or Republican, wants a government shutdown. Now, that's not Leader Thune saying that. That's then Leader Schumer saying that. Now he's obviously completely changed his tune. Now, I did point this out. This is important to understand, because the other side is saying, well, why don't you sit down and negotiate and compromise? I mean, the House could have passed a CR with $1.5 trillion in spending cuts to match the CR proposed by the Democrats of $1.5 trillion in new spending. Okay, there you go. Now you got something to compromise on. That's not what the House did. The House said, well, let's do what we've done 13 times under the Biden administration. Let's just pass a clean CR at Biden's level and really beg the Democrats to say yes, but they haven't been willing to do that. Again, I know people are waiting to vote. I'm not going to talk about the issue, the fact that Obamacare is causing premiums to skyrocket and what they're demanding in terms of extending the enhanced subsidies that were supposed to be temporary. They set the expiration date, but it's Obamacare that's causing premiums to be unaffordable, and they want those enhanced premiums to mask the failure of Obamacare. But I won't get into detail on that. I will talk about, this is day 23. We are forcing about 2.8 million federal workers to work. Military, law enforcement, people who write Social Security checks, air traffic controllers, keeping our skies safe. But we're not paying them. That's absurd. Now, what's even more absurd is they will get paid. Whether they're working or furloughed, they will get paid because of the Government Fair Treatment Act of 2019. Once this ends, I'm assuming it'll end with an appropriation, they'll get paid. So the Government Fairness Act, all it does is recognize that reality. It shouldn't cost a dime. CBO has a alternate universe score on this. There's zero score. This doesn't cost the federal government a dime. Just pay the workers that are being forced to pay. Pay them now, not later. Incredibly common sense. I'll end with a surprising support letter I got from the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association. They pretty well bat down all the arguments against this bill. Doesn't change the government's obligation to pay furloughed employees. They'll get paid. It does not single out favored political functions over disfavored ones. Again, President Trump is by and large honoring the past opinions of Office of Legal Counsel, Anti-Discrepancy Act. They say they don't believe it's empowering the administration to pick and choose what activities it carries out. And includes, say, the American public relies on the full scope of federal agency missions that are funded via appropriations, and political pressures that exist to advance appropriation bills in the first place will remain to encourage resolution. So no, we're not there yet, I'm sorry. I'll conclude quickly, okay? The bottom line is, as I talked to the senator from Maryland, the way to pass this law, the way to protect federal workers, isn't with the unanimous consent request on a bill nobody's ever seen. It's to vote for cloture on the Shutdown Fairness Act. Now, let's work out the differences. We agree on 95% of it. Let's work out those differences. Vote for cloture. We get this passed, I think, early next week. With that, I'll conclude my remarks on that. I should be speaking about 5 minutes on a wonderful nomination, Rebecca Tableson for the 7th Circuit, but I know everybody wants to vote. She did a wonderful job in the judiciary. She's a highly qualified lawyer. She'll make a wonderful judge for the 7th Circuit. I urge all my colleagues to vote for her cloture on her confirmation. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a closed debate on the motion to proceed to Calendar 191 S3012, a bill to appropriate funds for pay and allowances of accepted federal employees for periods of work performed during a lapse in appropriations and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
The question, by unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to Senate Bill 3012 to appropriate funds for pay and allowances of accepted federal employees for periods of work performed during a lapse in appropriations and for other purposes shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso. Thank you. Mr. Bennett. Houston.